So to get into our first ankle stretch, what you're going to do is you're going to take your object, which could be your slant board, could be your foam wedges, could be any objects that you can find at home that you can stack on top of each other with a flat surface to get yourself into this position, or have some sort of slanted surface. The degree of height or the degree of angle that you need is going to depend on your ankle eversion range of motion. Now, this is important, especially if you're chasing ankle dorsiflexion, i.e. your ability for your knee to go past your toes. If your ankle can't evert, it's going to have a really hard time dorsiflexion, or dorsiflexing, excuse me. So a lot of people, like I said, they ignore this. They just keep hammering dorsiflexion and trying to get their shin to come over their toe, but they don't have the space in the joint to accommodate that. And the way to create the space in the joint is to make sure that you have eversion, especially, and inversion. Eversion is especially important if you're working on ankle dorsiflexion, because those two are kind of paired together in terms of just how our joint is built. So without eversion, we don't get dorsiflexion. So if this is very limited for you, or you really struggle with this work, and you've been harping on or trying to improve ankle dorsiflexion and finding that you're getting nowhere, or it's just miserably slow, you probably want to see if this is a limiting factor for you. And the work that we're going to do today will be a good way for you to start to explore that and start to train that. So, like I said, the height of, or the angle of your slant board is going to depend on your range of motion. So you want to set yourself up so that the higher side of the slant board is towards the outside or the pinky side of your foot. And then what we're going to do in that position, or what ankle eversion would be, is that you could either do it one of two different ways. You could lift the outside of your foot up, so now I can actually slide my fingers underneath my foot on that side, or you can drop your shin down. So if you have a foam wedge and you only have one height to work with, you can either take your foam wedge, put it in front of you, set your foot on it, and then drop your shin to the outside. And if you feel like you really have to drop it, your other option would be to take your second wedge, because they often come in packs of 2, and either wedge it underneath however far you need to get the right height, right? Or you can stack them one on top of the other. Then you might find that you can still maximize how close the outside of your foot is towards your shin, or how much you can close off this angle without having to drop your shin or having to drop it very little. So for me, because like I said, when I put my foot up here, I can drop it quite far out, bearing in mind that if you're dropping it to the outside and the inside of your foot is lifting, you are indeed maxed out and you don't need to increase the height. For me, I'm going to need to, so I'm going to bring this guy up, and then I'm going to try this again. I'm going to go, okay, here, if I drop it to the outside, can I keep going? I can, so I might try bumping this up one more. Now, here, yeah, so it doesn't take me long, and then if I drop my shin to the outside any more than this, my heel wants to swing and rotate, so my tibia wants to start to externally rotate, and the inside of my foot wants to lift. So I'm basically maxed out here. Now here's the other thing that I like about these slant boards, is I can get right in here and I can anchor myself to this board, which means when I do my isometrics, which we're gonna get to, I can get way more force output. And it's important because you want to convince your body to give you more joint space or capsular space or range of motion for ankle eversion, which means we're going to be working at high intensities to really try and convince that body. If we're just doing light, little, easy isometrics, you know, you might get yourself a little ways down that line, but for most people, it's not going to be enough and their body's not going to be convinced to give them more. So this is really nice. It's not necessary, and you can still latch on to those guys as well, or whatever you have accessible to you at home. But again, it's just something else that I like about these slant boards. So I want you to set yourself up here. Hopefully you have already, and you're starting to bank some time stretching in this position. Bear in mind that the other thing that you can and should play with when you're up here is not just thinking, okay, I'm just going to go into ankle eversion. You want to scan your ankle and find where it's tightest for you, right? So the other thing that I can do is I can actually scan ankle or ankle dorsiflexion in eversion to find where it feels tightest as well. So I could bring my knee back a little bit so my shin's angled backwards towards me, and I can explore coming forwards and just going, okay, while in ankle eversion, at what point do I feel the most tension, not pinching, that's important, but tension in my ankle. So if you're bringing your knee towards your toe and you start to run into pinching in the front, you've probably gone too far, scale it back a little bit. But we do want to find some pulling in that ankle, or some lengthening feeling or stimulus. Now, when you found where it feels tightest for you, that's where you're gonna do your work. So don't worry about trying to match me and look like I do here. Explore if you take your shin forwards a little bit, if you take your shin backwards a little bit, or you could also just bring your foot back towards you or bring your foot forwards a little bit as well on your board. So for me, if I can do this without moving my whole mat, I'll come right up to the edge here. There. So that for me feels like where I get my best stretch, or I notice the highest degree of tension or resistance in my ankle. So you guys are just gonna hang out and stretch here. While you're stretching, I'm gonna talk you through what our isometrics are gonna look like, because, like I said, we have to convince our body to give us more. Just stretching in this position isn't enough to really send the signal to your body, we need more, and for your body to be convinced to actually do something about that signal. So right now we're just stretching. You're giving your body time to adapt and adjust to this position, letting that tissue build some stretch tolerance. But what we're gonna do for our isometrics is we're gonna start to push through the outside of our foot, okay? So what I like to do in my head when I do these is I basically imagine a laser kind of slicing my foot all the way to the back of my heel in half. And I start to think about everything on the right side of that laser, or the outside towards my pinky side, getting heavier and heavier and heavier into that board, as if trying to rotate this way into kind of an ankle rolled position, but you're not actually gonna move at all. After that, you're gonna totally throw it in reverse, and then you're gonna make that right side of the foot as light as you possibly can, trying to think about lifting the outside of your foot up. Now, careful you don't just end up lifting your toes. A lot of people end up doing this when they're doing that. You're not going for toes so much as you're going for your ankle. If your toes get a little bit involved in this, that's okay. It's something that you can get better at with time, but you're really thinking about getting the outside of your foot to lift, or thinking about closing the gap between the outside of your foot and your shin. So you're trying to squeeze everything on this side to make it as light as you possibly can. Hopefully that makes sense. The details are so important when we're doing small joints like this, so I want to make sure that you guys grasp that. Now, we're going to dive into it here. If you feel like you need more time here, please hit pause. I want you to try and solidify your body in this position. You should now look like a statue. So for the rest of this little isometric set here, I don't want you moving at all in terms of your foot or ankle position. You're just doing isometrics, meaning no change in length. You're staying as you are. So that imaginary laser cutting our foot in half, everything to the outside of that laser is going to start getting heavier into that board. And we're going to think rotate our foot through that board or whatever object you're using. We're going to start with 20%. We're going to make our way up to 40, 60, 80, and then your greatest, safest, pain-free effort. Now, like I said, you have to send a strong signal to your body saying, we need more. We need more range, we need more eversion in this ankle and in this ankle capsule. So you have to give it your all here, or at least work up to giving it your all as you keep coming back to this class and doing this class over time and letting your ankle adjust to the stimulus. Eventually, you're going to be at max effort. We're going to hold this for another 5 seconds, and then you're going to throw it in reverse. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now you're making everything on the outside of that ankle as light as you possibly can. You should feel a lot of stuff happening through the outside here, through the outside of the ankle, through the outside of the shin. All these outer shin muscles are working to make the outside of your foot as light as you possibly can, and trying to close the gap on the outside of that foot without letting anything move at all. And you're holding that for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then you're just going to slowly relax. You're going to melt back into that position.